to inspect it.
In its truest sense, the paranormal is that which is not explained by normal science. To understand the paranormal, you have to first understand that we don't understand it.
Hello and welcome back to Paranormal Perspectives. My name is Stan, and tonight we're speaking to John Fraser. How are you, John? And thank you for being here.
Excellent, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And I think we're here to talk about, of course, the paranormal, no surprise, but it's really about the events that inspired your book and what your book is really about, because I think you have a similar mission to me, because I'm trying to kind of quantify in some way or form the paranormal, to find the measure of everything. Because the paranormal itself, it's so hard to fully describe and measure and test and reattempt whatever scientific measure you could apply to what we would describe as the paranormal. And I'm trying in my own way to sort of say what I've seen, basically, and trying to fully understand it. And in your book, One Big Box of Paranormal Tricks, the various different forms of paranormal phenomena could be explained by a singular kind of unifying thread of explanation. So it could be human influence or various, maybe just a thread that kind of binds it together, that kind of could be the cause of the various things that we experience that we can't explain. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into the conversation with you. It's going to be quite interesting. So to start things off, really, because a lot of people that will be watching this episode won't know much about you. So who is the true John Fraser? What excites you?
What excites me? Paranormal-wise, I have never had a outstanding, amazing, mind-turning paranormal experience. I had a few odd things happen to me. I mean, it's a wonderful coincidence that your show is called Paranormal Perspectives, and my book has a subtitle, Paranormal Perspectives, as well. So if we can both learn to pronounce it, I suspect we're talking along very similar lines already. However, I became fascinated when I was probably 13 or 14, a very atheist, agnostic background, that there were people that actually took the paranormal seriously over and beyond horror films, and perfectly respectable authors such as Peter Underwood and Andrew Green at the time that wrote perfectly sensible sounding books about people that had seen totally unbelievable things, and got myself into the thing. Well, it's probably one of life's last great mysteries. We've been to the moon, climbed Mount Everest, we've done most stuff, but the one thing, science, and me as a 13-year-old hadn't done, is actually try to explore that bit of occurrences that science has not yet explained, even if to bring in a natural explanation. So after that, I was kind of hooked. I joined an organisation called ASP, which is even more difficult to pronounce than Paranormal Perspectives. When I was 17, it actually stands for the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. I managed to get myself invited to join the Ghost Club a few years later, joined the Society for Psychical Research a few years after that, and I'm now on their council. And in the meantime, basically delved further into the paranormal, conducted various investigations, and certainly haven't come up with any answers, absolute answers. But as we'll probably discuss later, I tend to think that paranormal experiences are put into too many boxes based on your own beliefs. And I kind of thought, if you're trying to get some kind of theory that even science or parascience might take seriously, nearly every big great theory is one theory. Newton, apple dropped in his head, maybe he tested it with a pear afterwards. He didn't come up with a separate theory of pear gravity and apple gravity. And likewise, maybe we're kind of going off in so many different directions for a explanation based on our own cultures and belief that we're kind of missing out with the obvious. So that's kind of where I got to date.
You present some really interesting points there, because you are kind of presenting the point that simply that there is a belief bias when it comes to interpreting the paranormal any form of paranormal phenomena, really. We have this filter that we have to, we tend to see things through, and most of us aren't really fully aware because I grew up in quite a religious community, let's just say, and I had the burden of having a first-hand paranormal experience that to them will be seen as dirty, quite frankly, or dark, or something of the devil, so to speak. So I had to keep that one quite close to my chest, and I did give it away a couple of times at Sunday school almost, and I was worried about almost being arrested by the spiritual police of the day. But yeah, it's quite a burden on somebody when you're presented with a completely new parallel interpretation of reality that completely conflicts with the life that you knew before. So I then kind of question, even without the removal of belief filters, how could we ever be qualified enough to be able to fully explain the paranormal? Because we only have 5 known senses currently. Do we really perceive enough about reality as well? That's always been my big question. So, but to you, like John, like I'd ask, what is the paranormal to you in its truest sense?
In its truest sense, is the paranormal is that which is not explained by normal science. Over and above that, it's all the weird stuff that happens to us that we either quickly put to one side and kind of call one of those things, or possibly in your case, Stan, you remembered and had to keep hidden. I mean, just going back to, you mentioned you were brought up in a religious background. I mean, one thing I do very much object to is, whatever your belief system, if you're going to investigate somebody else's experience, you don't investigate it with a preset ideas, and you certainly don't, for example, investigate it with the word demonologist on your calling card. It's clear you've already decided that you're investigating a potential demon. Regardless of whether you're right or wrong, it's liable to scare the family to death, as fear and trauma has been seen as a catalyst for unexplained phenomena. You're likely to make the whole thing much, much worse. So that's one of the reasons you should never bring your own beliefs into investigating this type of thing.
So what would be the most purest and cleanest way to observe paranormal phenomena? How would you, I suppose, unlearn those filters would be my question, because I've been trying to kind of answer that myself the last few years, and even though I've taken a step away from my chosen religion, as in chosen for me, it's taken me a long time to unlearn the various forms of doubt that comes into my mind when I'm confronted with quite extraordinary experiences. So there's things that I've seen myself firsthand that I've experienced with other people there. And yet there's still that thing at the back of my mind, okay, well, you're probably just imagining it. Or, I mean, yeah, there are influences there. It could be, I don't know, you could be on a form of medication which could affect your interpretation of reality. There are other factors outside of religion too. So how would you clean your mind in terms of being, okay, would you be the most purest observer of these events?
Well, you can't clean your mind. You always have a belief system. But I mean, if you're trying to investigate a situation, you should ask open, non-leading questions. That goes without saying. There's nothing wrong with flagging up possibilities to people and seeing if it fits their perception of the evidence. But certainly, the best paranormal investigator should admit he or she isn't sure what's happening, might have a better understanding of the paranormal chaos, but certainly cannot give an instant answer and certainly can't give an instant cure. I'll give you a fun example of that. There was still is a famous case, council house that became known as being haunted by the Black Monk of Pontefract. Quite what a black monk was doing in the 1950s council house, can't be sure. It shows how somebody's perception of what it could be can kind of give the whole thing a life of their own. But there was a lot of poltergeist phenomena. There was 1 or 2 apparitions, and there was a couple of attempts at exorcisms that seemed to exacerbate the situation rather than relieve it. Do you know what finally stopped it? Somebody had the mad idea of putting garlic cloves up, which would actually, in Romania, be the standard cure for any vampire phenomena. And for some reason, it changed it, settled it down, and certainly for a number of years worked. So, I mean, if it had been a demon, it would have to have been a vampiric demon, so we'd have to believe in vampires and demons, and then it starts to get a little bit too many boxes. So that kind of shows why you have to keep an open mind, at least in the outward side. Of course, we've all got our own ideas of what it might be or may not be, but obviously if you're investigating it, they shouldn't predominate. You shouldn't tell somebody you've got a portal to hell in your bathroom and you better beware when you take a shower and those sort of things. And whilst that's slightly flippant, I have heard people say similar.
Yeah, I get what you mean. That case in itself, I remember reading up about that a few years ago. It's fascinating because, if one just referencing vampires, vampires do make me. I love a good vampire movie like Bram Stoker's Dracula from years ago, amazing. But I still love, if you think about the scientific world. Okay, well, in the fiction, vampires can be killed by daylight, but they're fine at night on a full moon. The moon is a reflection of sunlight. So how come they're perfectly fine at night? And there's always that logic that kind of makes me laugh, really, though. But either way, it's just kind of fancy in that regard.
I mean, there's a lot of Stoker and fiction in what we perceive of vampires being. But let's look at what the Romanians perceive as vampires being. A lot of vampire cases involved, in inverted commas, somebody coming back from the dead, making strange banshee-like noises, throwing around pots and pans, moving objects, etc., etc. Now, what's the difference between that and what we in a very sensible West would call a poltergeist case?
Well, not so much, but really. So I was wondering.
I mean, there's been quite a number of vampire cases researched in the East and certainly in the Greek Orthodox side of Europe, which have basically all the symptoms of a classic poltergeist. It's just while we bring in the devil or a black monk, the Eastern Europeans, because of their cultures, tend to put the onus on a vampire. But the phenomena is still very similar. So we either have vampires, devils, demons, black monks, because they crop up everywhere. I mean, it seems to be our typical entity in the UK for some reason. And numerous other things all going around causing havoc. Or we possibly have one power, as yet not totally understood, which we all give different names because it's kind of nearly reassuring to kind of give something a name. Well,
it would be the paranormal, wouldn't it? I suppose the classic label we put. But that's the unifying thread. So I wonder, is it a form of psychic phenomena? I wonder, because yes, there are cultural influences which may inspire the explanation. So, like you say, the Black Month, poltergeist activity, vampires and such. But is this human activity?
No, that's a bit. I mean, that is a big question. I mean, my book tends to slightly favour human activity, if you like, powers within us, RSPK, for two reasons, although it doesn't discount outside entities in any way completely. But why I personally favour inner entities is, A, these 99% of these entities create a lot of random chaos, but rarely say or do anything sensible. Quick example, one of my colleagues investigated quite a famous case called the Andover case, where there was poltergeist knocks coming from the wall, and they got a communication going. It was very laborious communication. It was not every letter of the alphabet until you took the right letter. But they managed to get some basic messages. And did they get what it's like in the afterlife? Did they get anything meaningful? No, they actually got predictions of next week's football results. Now, the catalyst for the entity or phenomena seemed to be a young girl of about 12 or 13 who was actually very keen on football. Now, I ask yourself if the devil, a vampire, an evil black monk, or just some random undead person was causing that phenomena, surely they'd have something more profound to say than the next week's football results. And even worse, they didn't get them right any more than about chance. Another lovely example is one most of your listeners will have heard of, Enfield poltergeist case. Now, sceptical colleague of mine, Chris French, has made a very good point when Janet, the main girl who was the catalyst for most of the phenomena, was apparently possessed by an old gentleman that had died in the Enfield house. He didn't talk about himself. He didn't make any meaningful comments apart from ask questions about menstruation. Now, what would an 82-year-old man be wanting to ask questions about menstruation about? What would a 12-year-old girl, who was probably too shy to ask them in her everyday persona? No, that would be something she would be very desperate to know. So if all this possibly quite real phenomena is caused by outside entities, they're not very good quality entities, if you know what I mean.
That is fascinating. Like, there is part of it that I've watched the films, I've seen the interviews, I've seen different interpretations of those events. Of course, I can never speak purely because, of course, I wasn't there then. But just my observation of that is weird. The subject matter of, I believe it was it Bill Wilkinson?
Bill Wilkinson, that was it, yes. Who did genuinely die in the living room chair. That amount's been proved and could potentially have been haunting the place. But nevertheless, when he, in his voice, possessed Janet's vocal cords, that was his basic line of questioning. That and a lot of swear words. And I'm sure Bill wasn't like that in everyday life. I'm sure he was a perfectly nice, pleasant gentleman.
It wouldn't surprise me. I just think that this is the time before the internet, so this girl, where would she have got the information from? I mean, it's not impossible, talking about psychic phenomena, that some people can just pull information out of seemingly thin air, but can just know things about a place. It could be that Bill Wilkinson himself, could have been, of course, her, but an alternative part of her personality. It could be a personality disorder where, I forget exactly the right terminology though, but there is a condition where essentially two consciousness can exist in the same brain, operating independently of each other. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah, basically like that. So
it could be that. But
it could be that, and then the little girl, bless her, may not be aware that she's switching between the two, and then she's just drawing from information to build the story. But then there's other phenomena as well where they've reported. There's that famous photo of her supposedly levitating through the air. Again, could be psychically caused. It could be just hallucination, as in like daydreaming. I'm just jumping across the room. Who knows? But there's something about that case that just seems off to me. Off in terms of evidence, as in like reliability of evidence. But there's something about it that seems quite extraordinary as well. But yeah. What do you think it might be?
Well, the SPR is actually lucky enough to have all 120 hours, I'm guessing, to a certain extent, of tape still intact. And to be honest, I am not totally impressed at the iconic picture of Janet flying along the room towards David's soul, who was the iconic poster at the other side of the wall. It could well have been her jumping off the bed. It's nearly impossible to tell. But there is such a amount of evidence, such an amount of witnesses in that case, from police officers to the press to neighbours, that it is very difficult to actually write the whole thing off. Another interesting twist is I was the same person that investigated the Andover case, Barry Colvin again, been of great help to the paranormal community, actually did a lot of work in analysing poltergeist raps, of which there was some at Enfield, and actually found that he couldn't replicate them by going like that in the table, because when I go like that in the table, the sound envelope peaks very quickly and then gradually drops, whilst with most well-authenticated poltergeist cases, the sound envelope actually rises very slowly, as if the sound is coming out of the wood rather than going into it. And once Barry had established that, he actually played the Enfield tapes through, and the knocks that came out were very much of the unusual type that couldn't be very well replicated by this. So another little bit of evidence. That's another little bit of evidence for Enfield. I think there is a significant possibility there was a bit of juvenile pranksting. Pranksting's a word. Quite possibly some valid poltergeist phenomena. The question is, what caused it? Was it an outside entity, or was it two girls that were members of the family under stress? One of the family was quite ill, and suddenly found excesses of mental energy to chaos subconsciously.
That logic makes sense. When it comes to paranormal phenomena, adolescence tends to be a recurring theme. And that's the time of your life where we've all been there, really, like the height of emotions, your hormones are going crazy. I tend to notice more and more cases, for the people that I've spoken to anyway, things happening around that age. I mean, I can attest to that at least. When I was a teenager, I was quite an angry kid, to say the least. I was really into my metal and rock, and not that metal and rock is really about anger, it's more about the outletting of anger, really. But yeah, I was trying to make my way through my thoughts around an experience I had when I was younger, and just some profound things that changed my life. And I thought, well, I felt like in a way I lost my childhood because of that, really. But there was a time when I was quite angry, when there was quite a peak. I was about between the ages of 13 and I'd say 18. This is when activity peaked in my family home. I'd hear, the most common thing was, and this is something me and my sister heard, was this party, this ghostly party. And at first I thought, okay, well, somebody's having a party, maybe a neighbour nearby. This was about 3 a.m. as well, in the middle of the night. I opened the window to hear where it was coming from. It got louder and louder, and I could hear music, I could hear laughing, glasses chinking and all that, and it was coming from the middle of my room. It was the weirdest thing. It came directly from the centre of my room. And I looked around thinking, okay, well, is it sound maybe bouncing across my room from a vent nearby that could be transported from like a second neighbour? But it happened in my sister's room as well. My sister's room was on the other side of this house, and it wasn't the biggest house in the world. We kept hearing this event almost every night. It wasn't consistently, but it would be maybe 3 or 4 nights out of every 7 days. And we'd hear whistling in the house, and eventually we got these strange smells, and it all grew to a point where I entered my room at the time after having a really bad day with bullies at school, and I was just really angry, really fed up. I thought, okay, that's it, I'm done now. I opened my room, and I don't know whether it was a hallucination, whether it really happened, because there was no one else there to also validate that. It was just purely myself then. I saw my room was night, but it was daytime. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon then. And it was night, and my room was distorting, and I could feel like gravity pulling me down. And I, like any other kid, just bolted. I just ran. I literally ran down the street until I ran out of breath, really, because that was like one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. But I've always questioned, okay, well, was that purely my hallucination, like a build-up of energy of just excess teenage angst, essentially, or did that really happen? Because all I know is the other previous things I mentioned I shared with my sister, but that one thing was purely me. So yeah, kind of curious to hear, what's your thoughts around that? Do you think there could be a potential cause?
There's a third explanation. It could have been a hallucination. It could have been some not quite so divine intervention. It could also have been your own mind, in effect, creating a tulpa, a sort of thought form. I mean, I remember when I was 15, what did I want to do most? I wanted to go to a party, a proper party.
Yeah, that's fair.
Hey, if I was going to create anything, it would have been a party in the middle of my room. Now there's a good example of that as well. If your listeners have heard of the Philip experiment, where a group of Canadian paranormal investigators got together to, in effect, try to invent a ghost. They came up with this non-existent entity called Philip the Cavalier, who had never existed. It was just purely collective fiction. They gave him a wife, they gave him a mistress, just for a bit of colour. Apparently, so the story went, the wife threw herself off the turrets and was obviously besought and obviously had to walk the earth evermore. So they kept telling this story and talking about Philip as if he was real. And they didn't actually get visual thought forms, but what they did get was quite a lot of poltergeist activity. Tables started to move. In fact, they've got their table moving in Canadian TV. And it's kind of agreed there was no entities involved, it kind of shows what the power of mind can actually potentially achieve, setting aside trickery and the usual things, because obviously neither of us saw that firsthand. But taking that at face value, it shows what a situation without an entity can actually do.
Yeah.
I still prefer the idea of creating a party in the room, though.
Yeah, I was that much of a reject at school. I wasn't really invited to many parties, but to be fair, I didn't really like it. I mean, everybody used to go clubbing back in the day. I don't know if you've ever been clubbing before. I tried it myself, and it just wasn't really my thing. I didn't really feel cool enough, really. But no, I was very much a gig person. I love like live music. I was all for gigs back in the day. That was awesome.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes. Yeah. Did you mourn past?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wasn't. I was more Pink Floyd and David Bowie, but no, I got every respect for Ozzy, and I wish him well in whatever life he has next.
Yeah, I see so many memes of kind of Ozzy going to hell out of choice, really, rather than heaven, kind of thing, and living amongst the devil and having a great time. But either way, like he's responsible for inspiring so many people for many years of his life, and he pretty much was part of starting an entirely new music genre.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
the best meme I've actually seen of Ozzy is actually he's walking into the arms of Jesus with a T-shirt on saying, "What the F am I doing here?" And I just thought that's incredibly touching. Because, what did he actually do when it was bad? I mean, it's quite a good paranormal lesson. You've got all these fundamental Christians playing Black Sabbath music backwards and coming up with all kinds of, I am the devil, worship Satan. And it just shows when you have a belief system, you can play a record backwards and clearly hear words that were never there, never intended to be there. And, and conjure up non-existent phenomena, in effect.
So you say like that those filters, it's the word we used the other day in one episode, it's pareidolia.
I
always confused pareidolia and simulacra. Are they essentially the same thing, basically? Like, because to me it's just simply it's your brain filling in the blanks. So, for example, if there's a belief system, that belief system is filling in the blanks for you to make it evil.
Yeah. I must admit, I mean, pareidolia is strictly through the eyes, like seeing Jesus in a bit of burnt toast or what have you. I always call the listening side audio pareidolia. I'm sure you've got the word right, but I've never actually used it. Because even if I did use it, I don't think anyone would know what it meant.
I think people should use it more every day because I don't know why, it's just a nice sounding word. I have this weird thing where just particular words just interest me. It's like not even about what the word's about, they just sound interesting. It may be about something horrible, but anyway. But yeah, it's these belief systems tend to kind of fill in the blanks for us and sometimes give us these kind of false flag situations where we believe certain things have happened. And
yes, but over and above that, certain things may have happened, but they give you a box to put them in. And what my book, Paranormal Perspectives, One Big Box of Paranormal Tricks, from Ghost to Poltergeist to the Theory of Just One Paranormal, tries to do, apart from getting in the Guinness Book for one of the longest book titles, is to actually show when you strip the paranormal phenomena bare, it's possibly, at least mainly, of one type. You usually get a stressful situation, and then you see apparitions, or you move objects, or occasionally you have, under different types of frames of mind, possibly under hypnosis, the ESP premonition side seems to emerge. But there's not necessarily, over and above those boxes, anything else. Now, we could argue, and people could sensibly argue, that acts as a catalyst for some kind of outside entity causing these things. But I've told you why I tend to lesser favour that, but it's still a perfectly valid argument. But even then, I mean, do you really have God, devil, pixies, imps, elf, goblins? Yes, goblins are taken seriously in some Latin American countries. Vampires, and so on, causing all these different things. Or surely you have one type of external entity being the cause. So again, you need to whittle down your boxes. I mean, when is it a devil causing that object to fly across the table, and when is it a imp, which people believe in? When is it a demon? When is it, well, God doesn't really do that sort of thing, but if he did, when is it God creating a miracle? Surely these are caused by Occam's razor. You have to start by thinking they could be caused by one type of thing or one type of power. I mean, it's not impossible that you've got all these entities floating around, but it's kind of a bit like, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, with this, my understanding is like you're beginning to kind of essentially measure the paranormal, because to me, like, the paranormal is like the unknown zone. It's like the barrier that you do not cross, because beyond there is just the infinite expanse of space and infinite interpretation and such. And at least having this kind of box approach, I don't know if approach is the right word for it though, but yeah, I don't feel like I'm doing it justice there, but yeah, either way, like the box definitions is at least helping people who've experienced something that's very hard to explain and even share with the world, really, to at least try to begin to explain what could be the cause of these things. Now, I'd love to send you my full story at some point anyway, because I'm kind of curious to see kind of which events you would sit in to which box, because much of it I still don't have the slightest clue as to what they could have been, because I've even experienced something that pursued me for years, and it took me a long time to understand what happened. So I mentioned to you previously about me having this accident, I think before this call anyway. So had this accident, had this out-of-body experience, and walked the hospital, and I met something in this, I don't know, an out-of-body experience. It was like I was in limbo, this in-between place, and I met something that was just overwhelmingly frightening. It was incredibly powerful. It kind of, I don't know if I connected with it though, but I was almost transported all over the universe. And the weirdest thing about this experience was one of the locations I remember from this interaction was me landing on this walkway on water. It was a really weird location because I saw that they were these teenagers with hoods on. They kind of turned around to almost like as if I was there. They were reacting to me being there. It was really weird, and I didn't really think much of it after that dream, though, because there was so much to take in. It was like this mega download of information, and so yeah. And after I got better, I managed to, left hospital, and I, then discovered that I knew the layout of the hospital before I had then been there physically to explore it, though. So I knew everything. And the weirdest thing was, about 3 years later, I was with my friend. We used to take this particular route to get to, because we lived in Oxford at the time, and there's the Hinksey Pools there. There was a walkway through South Hinksey Village, and it's a beautiful little place. It's a shortcut to get into the city centre because it's quite busy. And I took this path, and there's this body of water near this place called Lake Street, and the locals call it the Devil's Backbone as well, which is a creepy enough name in itself. And I stood on this bridge, and it was a bridge that was sat on top of water. It was like the water wasn't that far below. And partway through this lake, there's an additional set of stairs that goes over this train bridge. And I realised, despite that being the first time I was there in person, that was exactly the place I saw in that vision I had a few years prior. It's exactly the specific place, to the point where I recognised the cracks that were in the pavement, the specific hole that was in the wired fence. And you could say it's a form of deja vu, as in, like, the brain could just be, okay, just a bit of a glitch there and then, but I had this image in my brain for years that I never forgot, and then it matched the reality, and that's when all this weird phenomena happened, where this thing followed me back. And I had all sorts of poltergeist activity, like items being thrown across the room, like I mentioned before, whistling, and the party, this distorting of this reality thing. And I noticed, after I looked back, after years after all those events happened, that there was a link. That it seemed to be that a lot of these events were because of this entity. I would see this dark creature in the room, and it would also affect people's behaviour around me as well. People get quite aggressive and angry, like they all had the same look in their eyes. It's like there was no soul; it just left.
So I could ask, was it a head injury you got? Or?
It was a mixture of things. It was mostly leg, arm, ribs, pelvis.
Yeah, quite a trauma.
Bit of a mess. Yeah. I'd test, and apparently no brain damage. But they might be wrong. That's the thing. So all of that could be conjured by me trying to comprehend a traumatic event. That might be my little then child brain, which eventually became a teenager. But just my little brain then trying to comprehend everything that happened by putting things into characters. Because people as well, through religions, for example, anything bad has to be put into an entity. So, for example, they created the devil to represent all the bad, and it could be an angel to represent all that is good. For some reason, humans find it easier to comprehend things when they put things into little characters, or maybe little boxes, you could say. Boxes,
yeah. I'll give you, just because you were talking about precognition and deja vu and what have you, I've got an interesting little tale that I mentioned in my book. Once upon a time, I was part of a hypnotic regression group. In fact, I've still got the hypnotic amulet. I actually bought that one last week. It's just a joke. So if any of your listeners come in and say they're in a trance, it's not my fault. But what we found, I was a terrible hypnotic subject. So they had nothing better to do with me than to try to train me to be a hypnotist under careful supervision. And from both experiences, I kind of found there was a definite need to please, which is very suggestible. And even in my rubbish state of hypnotism, I was definitely in a slightly higher state of consciousness. But what we found is, when we got good subjects, is there was plenty of examples of past lives, most of which, when checked, turned out to be false past lives, such as there was a example from a particularly good subject, sadly just before I joined the group, where he was a soldier in the First World War, and prior to that a student at Cardiff University, soldiering bits. All his officers didn't exist. He didn't exist. There are good records for the First World War. So it was just the subconscious desire to please. However, he's never been to Cardiff, and he walks to Cardiff University in this past life each day, describing with huge accuracy all the landmarks he passed. Now, he hadn't been to Cardiff, but one of the hypnotic group in the room had been to Cardiff, and so it was potentially a wonderful source for providing the information if we think that under that state of mind he might be capable of picking up ESP. And I would just say it might be possible when the brain or body is put in some trauma that it kind of, other senses kind of become more alert and can pick up things that otherwise wouldn't be picked up. It's not a certainty by any means, but it could have been in some way relevant to what might have happened to you.
That's actually a good point. I know there is a certain survival instinct. You know, your body will do everything that it can to survive. Like I said, sometimes you imagine situations, but sometimes it does activate some primal instincts, things that are built in that we don't often use, but use as and when we need it. So then I question, you know, why did I need to perceive that specific bridge? Because it was only until I discovered the bridge for the first time in my body, in reality, or at least this reality, that I then realised, okay, that was the link to my experience. So that thing I experienced, it wasn't a dream, because I knew the entire layout of the hospital because of this experience. And then years later, I still remembered it. And once again, another piece of evidence, I knew this thing. So did it happen because I was meant to pass a message of some sort, or was it just purely just bad luck and my brain just accidentally just activating this superpower and I just happened to transport myself down the road? I just don't know. But either way, I spent many years of my life trying to figure out how is that possible. And I don't know if you heard the podcast theme tune, but it's actually full of little Easter eggs, so little tidbits of knowledge. So there's one particular phrase, forgive the cheesiness, it's the paranormal is just future normal. As in, I do believe at some point that science will evolve to a degree where we're able to perceive more of this reality and understand more of the inner workings of
I very recently did a very short video called "Would Galileo Think a Television Set Paranormal?" Choosing Galileo because he was a very clever bloke. He was a bit of a rebel as well, but could he make that jump? Could he make that jump? I don't think even he could. He might want to. He might want to inquire, but his first instinct would be, "That's God talking to me," or even worse, the devil. There's jumps you can't make, and you have to, if you like, rely on your accepted belief system. And I'm wondering if Galileo, seeing Gary Lineker Match of the Day TV, could possibly make that leap. Maybe if it was Match of the Day, you might think it was the devil. I don't know. Depends what you think. Sorry.
I think Galileo would have been more of a David Attenborough fan, yes, personally, though. But you never know. But that's a good point, because you think about was it the tale of Prometheus? And if you remember, a long time ago, it was perceived that only the gods could make fire. Mm. And there was that tale of Prometheus stealing the fire from the gods to share with humanity, and it was almost a symbol of humanity taking its power and beginning to grow and strengthen and so on. But a long time ago, it was seen as just literally creating fire, not from lightning or from other natural source, just on your own, out of your own choice, was seen as magic. Yet now we have the combustion engine. We have various different forms in which we use fire. I mean, even fire, using fire for certain things now is kind of old school, really. But I mean, what would Galileo have done if he knew about the rise of AI, for example? About the idea about playing video games and essentially controlling what you can see on a screen. It's profound, really, and considering our major technological advancements over the last few 100 years, nobody could predict where we would have gone by this point. So yeah, I mean, that's what I love about the paranormal, because that's the whole point of this podcast, is really saying it's okay to say you don't know.
Absolutely.
And also, it's okay to be presented with new ideas, new concepts. Don't be afraid for somebody to say something to you that you don't believe in, but you have something to learn from each other, and that's the thing. So once we remove that barrier, you begin to learn more about what's on the other side and be at peace with it, really. So we're just humans. We only have small brains, really. You can only perceive so much, and we almost have to accept our limits sometimes, but not be afraid to evolve. You mentioned about the art of ghost hunting.
I actually think I called it the art of ghost hunting because we haven't quite mastered how to do it scientifically. It is still an art rather than a science. And yes, it would be.
Right.
It would be good to call it paranormal investigation for starters. Ghost hunting's got all kinds of television, all kinds of television connotations. But no, my reference to the art of ghost hunting would have been to say it is still at this stage an art. It can be a very fascinating art, but I always then use the analogy. I seem to like my old famous dead people, that didn't Isaac Newton start off as an alchemist before he became a very good scientist? We do kind of play around with things before we take things in a more structured and serious way. I mean, Newton never found gold, but he found gravity instead. And probably even more valuable, I never created gold.
Right.
So even though I'd say it's still an art, it's probably slowly progressing, although some of the TV shows don't necessarily paint the best picture if we're using the art analogy. No, you don't scream every time there's a creak on the floor.
That's the thing. You said that better than I put there, definitely, because to me, I suppose what I was trying to convey was like, so at the moment, essentially, it's art. It's you can almost just describe it as pre-science. So it's nothing fully just defined there. But so, at what point would it transition from art to the science of ghost hunting? Basically, like, is it more of a technological thing, or is it more of a philosophical kind of understanding of the way the universe works? I know it's quite a big question. I think it's so late in the video, but I have to ask it.
I don't think it's a precipice. I think it's a gradual thing. I mean, what point did Galileo's notion that the Earth was round suddenly become fanciful? Well, obviously when Columbus did his bit, although let's Lokov and his, I've mispronounced that, and his sons from Norway probably did it 300 years earlier, but didn't get into the scientific textbooks. So it's probably a gradual thing. And it probably is a philosophical thing. There's quite a few theoretical physicists that are actually saying under quantum physics that paranormal phenomena is not impossible. Some of them are members of the Society for Psychical Research. And if that becomes more established, we might just hit the tipping point. But as for one big box, what I do want to make clear is I'm kind of refreshing what I would call an old theory that's fallen out of fashion. I'm not the great purveyor of something new that nobody has ever thought about it. I hope my book kind of puts it in it. My book's kind of not an indoctrination, it's more of what I'd call a meditation on the subject. It's light to read and occasionally a little bit amusing as well. But to get down to the more serious point, Oliver Lodge invented modern radio, was also a member of the SPR and the Ghost Club, is quoted as saying he conveyed a belief in the universal interconnectedness or one truth relating to the paranormal. William Crookes, a renowned chemist, who has also helped invent vacuum tubes, but was also in the Society of Psychical Research and the Ghost Club. They're both very good organisations to join, by the way, if anyone's listening. He was also a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, so he was into the occult. He posited the existence of a general paranormal faculty, which he called a psychic force. He wasn't into angels, ghosts, devils, and so on. And then we come to the 1980s, when you had a chap called Paul Devereux, and also a lesser-known chap called Albert Budden, talking about how the Earth energies could trigger off paranormal phenomenon, possibly via changing states of mind. So there's been a good tradition of people who have tried to kind of unite the different types of paranormal. Devereux particularly did so with regards to UFOs and other types of paranormal. When I say UFOs, I'm not talking about genuine little green men from some other country, some other galaxy that may well exist. I'm talking about the lights in the skies, the time lapses, the amazing circumstances where people are taken on board places and have these wonderful experiences which could just be the same as your imaginary party in your bedroom. Now, my general point is this is something that's been underlying the paranormal since basically we started investigating it. But it's kind of more romantic to talk about all these wonderful creatures, and so it's certainly more telegenic to talk about all these wonderful creatures. So it kind of keeps getting pushed in the back burner, and I just thought my book would hopefully light the candle again.
Yeah, and strangely enough, that was exactly the question I was about to ask you, because I've actually written a specific list of things to ask you as I try to be at least somewhat organised through these conversations, but at least be natural. But it's weird how you've almost answered them in sequence before I've asked you as well. So I think I need to send you a screenshot of this list as well. It's quite spooky, actually. But yeah, so essentially that's the mission of One Big Box of Paranormal Tricks. So essentially a unified theory.
It's to put forward the case for the unified theory, or a semi-unified theory. It doesn't explain absolutely everything. It certainly doesn't explain any potential real UFO encounters and so on. May not explain precognition quite so well, because you'd have to then chuck in a quantum leap of time, which of course is a second theory. But for all your, I hate calling it your normal ghosts, apparitions, poltergeist incidents, it might just help explain it. But that's really for the reader to decide. As I say, it's about opening the mind, not trying to push something in it.
Yeah, that's what I like for what I've read of your book so far. It's more of a, like I say, it's a conversation. It's not telling you what to think. It's presenting you with interesting kind of concepts and, as you say, a meditation on the subject. But I like how it pokes the conversation, and I'm kind of looking forward to kind of reading the rest of it. But yeah, it's interesting how our books are linked, and I think that's why our books are linked as part of the Paranormal Perspectives ranges. And again, it's so weird that the book range happens to be the same name as my podcast, because I made this before I applied for my book. And I mean, I hope your book does very well, and more importantly, it just spreads that message, really, because I think it's wonderful that more and more people are beginning to delve into the paranormal in a way with respect. So, as you mentioned before, there's so many people out there that go to ghost hunt as if they're hunting wildebeest, and for them they're hunting for entertainment and for likes, and there's nothing wrong with finding the paranormal entertaining, but I do try to, at least on this channel, try to treat it with respect. But also, there are parts of this that are entertaining. We've told some scary stories over the last few episodes, but it's about taking a step back and going, okay, what can we learn from this, and what can we teach each other? And I believe the paranormal is part of this great big conversation, and like I say, pre-science, and I think this will be common science in maybe the next century, who knows. But I love books like this that kind of poke through the standard of, okay, well, rather than simply saying I don't know what this is, we just put paranormal, it's just magic. It's okay to kind of open those doors and learn more and start questioning. So everything's potentially could boil down to things fitting within a certain defined box of explanation. So have you ever thought about forming a test, John, like an online test? So if anybody who's experiencing paranormal phenomena, ask that, maybe a predefined test that asks a certain number of questions, which could allow them to figure out, okay, which box does this sit in, to maybe better explain what could be going on, or at least start that conversation about what could be happening.
Not in the box sense, because I'm trying to whittle down the boxes. But I mean, the SPR has a subgroup called the Spontaneous Cases Committee, and anyone that's had a spontaneous inexplicable occurrence, we try to disseminate similar data, give a little bit of guidance if it's bothering them as well. And so if anyone was interested in telling the Spontaneous Cases Committee about any strange experiences of theirs, they would be welcome to Google Society for Psychical Research and follow the links and contact us.
Yes, I'll put the links in the description below for anybody to contact you through there. So yeah, I mean, it's just great kind of being part of that greater conversation. So yeah, I mean, I suppose to round up the video, I mean, I could talk to you for hours. I think you're the kind of person I could sit down with a good pint and just talk about anything for all day long. I think you're a very relaxing person to speak to and just full of knowledge.
We'd have to drink spirits.
But yeah, I mean, spirits aside, it's been a pleasure having you on.
It's been an absolute pleasure to be.
It always goes wrong towards the end. It always happens. But no, it's been a great conversation. I think you're quite a fascinating person to talk to. So, you're welcome to come back again and tell us about your next adventures, really. I suppose to sign off the video, is there a message that you want to leave for the Paranormal Perspectives watchers, really? Like, is there a message of knowledge you want to impart on them, or advice for anybody seeking the paranormal, at least to understand the paranormal?
To understand the paranormal, you have to first understand that we don't understand it and go in with a curious, open mind. I can't guarantee you'll come out with a complete understanding, but you will probably end up with less of a misunderstanding.
That's very good.
I hope that kind
of
makes sense, because that was not being flippant or anything like that. It's you really do need to not expect any magical answers overnight, but there is something that we don't understand, and that's a fascination in itself. So even if you can just scratch the surface, I think you'll find it fulfilling. Yes.
I think there's a famous quote by Galileo, which I think I need to really end the video on, which I completely forgotten, which is really nice. But I'll put it there in the text there. But ultimately, it's about never fearing the dark to know the unknown. Ultimately, it's you got to embrace the not knowing and be okay with it, be at peace with it, to fully understand it, or at least begin to understand what you're embracing. So yeah, no, thank you, John. That was a fantastic conversation, and you have a wonderful evening, and good luck with your new book. And before you go, where can people find your book?
The easiest thing is to, you'll undoubtedly have a link at the bottom of the video, but the easiest thing is to Google John Fraser One Big Box on Amazon, and it should come up. If not, add of Paranormal Tricks, but John Fraser One Big Box usually does the trick. It can be found on lots of other sites as well. That was just the lazy way of getting it. If you do want to buy it, I encourage you to seek it out through independent booksellers as well.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm already kind of in the midst of this journey, really, though, so I'm excited to see the conclusions. So, yeah, I'm glad there's kind of no major spoilers through this conversation, at least, though, but at least indicators. But yeah, anyway, you have a fantastic evening. Nice to meet you, John, and you take care.
Absolute pleasure. Nice to meet you, Stan.
Pleasure.
Choice, sharing dreams and blowing off steam. We'll lend you a hand, we'll let you stand, sharing stories about the unknown. Paranormal perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope, birthed from the unknown. Who you gonna call? I'm not a ghostbuster, no proton packs, just crossing streams of knowledge. It's not so scary when things get hairy. It's not the paranormal, just future normal. Breaking barriers, no longer the carrier, releasing the fear and replacing it with knowledge. Understanding each other, we uncover a whole new point of view within you. Paranormal perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope birthed from the unknown. The only stream we need to cross is the platforms to get the message across. Knowing each other, sister to brother. No ghost or spirit or demon will ever get the better of this medium. Paranormal Perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers. A message of hope birthed from the unknown.